The Constitution was amended, I'm not sure, with the Civil Rights Movement and for women in the 20s, is that correct?
We had a constitutional amendment that gave women the right to vote.
And for the African Americans during the Civil Rights Movement?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure how that was affected. Equal rights.
Down in the 70s.
Yeah, it was or was it a Supreme Court ruling?
I don't know. But I remember it was very recent. Jim Crow was around in the 70s.
Yeah. Do you know the number one most effective argument in the African American community for the sanctity of life? Personhood. You ask Alveda King, the niece of Martin Luther King Jr., you ask Day Gardner, you ask Walter Hoy, Pastor Walter Hoy. All of the African Americans in the pro-life movement at the 115 Forum with Father Frank are all pro-personhood, and they pointed the finger at the entire group and said, you are hurting us. All you other pro-life groups that are criticizing personhood as a movement are hurting our ability to speak into the African American community with the most effective means possible. And he's been here in New York. He's got a whole group of pastors here in New York that are pro-personhood.
Who's this?
Pastor Walter Hoy. He's out in California leading the California personhood movement. Scott?
Oh, I didn't.
Sorry, Rosie.
Question.
Yeah.
So the other question was, how could personhood change the Constitution, amend the Constitution the way they did? And do all the states have to be
You have to have 3/4 of the states ratify a congressional amendment. In other words, Congress offers the amendment, and the states then got to ratify it. Like, anybody remember the ERA back in the 70s?
Absolutely tended.
Yep. And it came within a few states of passing, but it didn't. The Equal Rights Amendment. So, yes, it would be a that's what the pro-life movement is called for, is a U.S. constitutional amendment, recognizing the right to life. Annabelle.
I'd like you to answer the question. When I leave here, I'm going to North Shore Hospital. My brother-in-law is just operating on his heart. Personally, if they were to say, if it happens to me and I need a valve, would it be against the movement if I got a pig's valve?
No more than your body ingesting bacon for breakfast.
Yeah, but how do you know if it's not one of those pigs that are human? So you shouldn't get that kind of pigs, man.
This is where we're trying to establish policy, public policy. And we're trying to do it in Georgia. And Family Research Council has sent their #1 scientist to Georgia and to North Dakota. I've just spent a week with him up in North Dakota, where we're trying to establish a clear sanctity of life public policy in the human-animal hybrid arena. We've got law that we've written that would meet the Georgia Conference of Catholic Bishops. Richard Dorflinger at U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops is taking a look at it. Dorinda Bordley of Bioethics Defense Fund. Father Tad up here in Philadelphia. Okay, we're working, Personhood USA is working with all of those elements.
So they would have to tell us if it was a regular pig or genetically.
Yeah,
it's like with the food. How do you know if it's genetically engineered? They were working on some kind of bill for that.
It's all over the board right now. But I would say most of it is okay. Most of it is okay right now.
Maybe not tomorrow.
No, in fact, that's what the scientists said. We're not even doing those things. Why are you trying to outlaw them? Well, now's the best time to draw parameters, is when they're not doing it.
I have like a quick question about the whole contraception side with the abortion-inducing drugs like emergency contraception.
Day after pill, Plan B.
Will this abolish those as well?
Yeah, anything that's an abortifacient would be outlawed under a personhood amendment or a personhood approach. Absolutely.
I noticed happily that when you use the definition of personhood as being the earliest biological beginnings, instead of using conception, is that purposeful on your part? Because the problem is conception has been redefined by the American College of Gynecologists, and unfortunately that leaves a window of unprotected time for the baby after fertilization.
We were actually an ACOG reproductive medical doctor on reproduction actually defend that position, that conception was not till implantation in the uterus. And it's amazing.
Right, because that's their official definition, even though it's not understood by others, that it's fertilization, that, you know, most people just, the traditional sense, and it was before 1965, that fertilization was the beginning of life. But now they use conception to, it's officially their definition, that it begins at implantation, which is contrary to what most people think it is. And that's why conception is kind of a difficult word to use, because it's not, we all don't understand it as the same thing.
Even fertilization has become obsolete as a term, and here's the reason why. You can go online and look this up. Nova, PBS, Nova online, 15 ways to create a human life is the title of the article online. By the time they had posted the article, 15 had become 30. There are 30 individual ways, parthenogenesis. You've never heard of the term? That is one of the ways. Somatic cell nuclear transfer. You can go on and on. There are 30 different ways to create a human life beyond fertilization. So that if you said fertilization, it wouldn't cover all of those.
That's also the death issue with the organ transplant also has more than 30 definitions, and that's, you know, it's a difficult thing. But I just asked though with the when you use, I like that, the earliest biological beginnings, is that now something you will adopt as going forward?
Are you familiar with Dr. Maureen Condit? Anybody know Dr. Maureen Condit? She's University of Utah. The USCCB uses her as their bioethics advisor for law. Okay. We have worked closely with Maureen Condit and Dr. David Prentice at Family Research Council, Catholic and Protestant, both, to satisfy the language requirements. And Judy Brown, if you're familiar with Judy Brown, she uses Diane Irving as a professor of bioethics. The one term that satisfies all is earliest biological beginning.
So is that something you will adopt going forward? Because I know when you talked about this, it looks like conception to natural death, but you know, in terms of amendments,
earliest biological beginning because of these 30 different ways to create a human life.
They're going to have to define what that means, though. The court's going to be like, well, what's the earliest
biological beginning?
Yeah, but they're going to be like, what's that? And they're going to go.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know, I just picture it in my mind. What is that?
It's a moving target with the emerging technologies.
Or bring science into it. Because you can't refute science now. You're saying when
they do it
the egg
all
and the
the
sperm
time.
come together, that's life.
No, we could not get the reproductive medical doctor to acknowledge that. The legislators could not, in the House committee last Thursday, get them to admit when life, they wouldn't state when life began.
Wow.
Would not.
And why do you think that they're getting pressured?
Well, the legislators wanted the definition of life, and the doctors refused to give it.
Yeah.
Because if you define it, you can regulate it. So if you leave it indefinite, you can't regulate it, so to speak. So
are you going to the heartbeat as?
The heartbeat in North Dakota was not defined as a time limit, so as early as a detectable heartbeat is 18 days. Using the vaginal ultrasound, you can determine a heartbeat at 18 days before a woman even knows she's pregnant.
So is that the standard for?
That's the standard in North Dakota now.
Okay.
If they, well, having passed the bill.
Now, are all those bills that you're talking about in North Dakota, you're just there as support? They're not part of personhood?
That is correct. There are